Today we begin with the end of life, that is, as represented by Hospice Austin, that enables people who are terminally ill and their families to go through their experience creatively. You're welcome to join us.
Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life. A series highlighting the cultural and social interactions between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KXAN. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
Hello, I'm Richard Thompson of Austin Metropolitan Ministries, welcoming you to this edition of the show. Today we're very pleased to be able to give a focus to what in the Christian tradition is called All Saints' Day in terms of how people deal creatively with life's end. It's been over a period of years now that worldwide and nationwide the hospice movement has been available to folks who are in this experience of dealing with those who are terminally ill and their families. There's been a hospice chapter here for a while in the capital city of Texas, and we're delighted today to have the Director of Spiritual Care with us, Janet Makos, to tell us more about hospice. Welcome, Janet.
Thank you.
And give us a little bit of a sense of what the word hospice means and how this movement started.
The word hospice comes from the same root as hospitality and hospital. Hospices in the Middle Ages were places where there were rest stops for travelers, weary travelers. The modern hospice movement began in England by a woman named Cecily Saunders, who is still alive and running a hospice in London called St. Christopher's. Cecily Saunders was herself, or is herself, a medical doctor, a licensed social worker, an RN, and a lay minister in the Anglican Church. The idea that she developed was that when a person reaches a point in their life where they've had a terminal illness and cure is no longer possible, that life is still possible. But it's important to seek palliation for the pains of life. And the pains of life can be physical, they can be emotional or psychological, and they can be spiritual.
Okay. And this movement came from Great Britain into the States.
Yes, and in the early 70s in Connecticut was the first hospice in the United States. And then in 1980 was when Hospice Austin was founded. It wasn't even until 1985 that hospice became a Medicare reimbursable medical program. And so Hospice Austin began at the very beginning, really, of the movement. And it began by people volunteering their time and their services.
But you have professional services that are
yes,
very much involved, and tell us what those services are.
Okay. To be a certified hospice, you must have a medical director, you must have nursing, you must have social workers, counselors. That's where your chaplains
And
fall.
what do these professionals do for folks? What are those services?
Well, what a person would do is on admission to a hospice program, you'll be visited by a nurse who will assess your physical needs to determine if your pain control regimen is what it needs to be. She or he will work with your physician to adjust your medications so that you are as awake and oriented as you can be, and yet pain-free also.
All right. Well, I think there are other services that we'll have an opportunity to come back to during the program, but I would like to turn pretty quickly here to a video that was done by Family Experiences Production about facing death. And they worked with you folks there at Hospice Austin, and let's take a look at, I know the medical director is on this and some others, and then we'll come back and discuss this.
I've learned over the years that it's very difficult to predict a person's length of time remaining, and generally try not to do that. But there are some things to look for. The first thing that I see is just progressive loss of function. By the time a person has, say, 2 months or so to live, often they're much less able to ambulate. They become short of breath easier. Their appetite diminishes. Often they begin to show signs of weight loss. They are more fatigued. Their mental alertness is less. They're at times confused. By the time we're down to a month or so, all of those processes are just more noticeable. They still may be able to ambulate. They still may be able to carry on appropriate conversations for short periods of time, but they often are in and out of sleep. Some of this depends on their medications. I mean, the medication certainly may worsen some of those symptoms. We try with good pain management to avoid sedation as much as we can, but the later the illness is, the more sedation occurs generally. By the time a person is down to a week or so remaining in their life, they may sleep most of the time. Certainly their energy level and fatigue levels are going in opposite directions. Their oral intake of food and water, nutrition, is generally very minimal. They may or may not have more pain symptoms that need to be managed, and because of that need medications that make them more sedated. Respiratory distress often occurs, more shortness of breath. That becomes a bigger problem as the latter days approach. And in the last hours of life, or sometimes the last days of life, you see some changes in vital signs: lower blood pressure, faster pulse, perhaps a fever, again, less alertness. Usually by the last couple of days of life, a person is rarely able to actually get out of bed by themselves.
People sometimes start to use euphemistic language about travel. I've talked to people who, they haven't driven in months, but they need to get the car gassed up, or they're looking for maps, or they want particular shoes. So people will start talking about, or trips that they're planning, and sometimes this can be very confusing to family members because you're thinking, oh, he wants to go on a trip, and we're not going to go on a trip. How do I let him know that? It's the euphemistic language. They are going to travel, but this is, they're not going to need a car, and they're not going to need a map, but they really don't need their walking shoes. But these are the sorts of things that people, attach to it. They're to leaving. Doesn't mean that a person's going crazy. It's just time. And there's certain things that happen when the time becomes ripe.
It's reported anecdotally that people often postpone their deaths for some event. It's not at all uncommon that a person lives to an anniversary or a birthday or a graduation date or some milestone that a family member or themselves may be reaching. And they may very well rally for that event or something associated with it, and then pass peacefully a day or two later. I mean, that is something that we do see.
Caretakers need to recognize that they do need that space to be by themselves, and it's not that you're abandoning them, and it's not that they don't love you anymore, but there's some issues that they need to take care of, spiritual issues, emotional issues, a lot of closures, and sometimes when that happens, they are breaking away from the family, and it's hard to let go.
It's okay to say goodbye.
Let them know that you still love them and that you will be all right if they do die.
I mean, you have to say, I love you, but I'm going to be okay. It's okay for you to go. You need to do what you need to do. And then telling people just to take steps as they're ready. Not that they feel like they need to go or that you want them to go, but when they're ready. And just even that you understand that they can't stay.
Knowing that you're there, that is the best gift I think you can give them. Just reassure that they're there and that you're okay with them not talking. You're okay with them not being there with you. If they know that, then it's easier for them to go through the different stages that they need to go through in order to have a peaceful death.
Well, that was very touching. And I think that as you look at that, as a spiritual director, wouldn't one of the things that was being said, that the doctor was saying, is that some people will endure until a certain occasion is passed. The will to live, a spiritual aspect of our being. I mean, that goes beyond psychological or medical or even emotional. It seems to me that that's one of the things that came to me from this.
Right.
You seen that a good bit?
That there is this overwhelming will to live.
To hold on
and to
beyond a
hold
certain
on.
point.
Yes, and sometimes when it seems completely unexplainable, someone continues to live. I was just talking with someone the other day who was saying that her mother had lived for 4 days after it was clear that her kidneys had completely shut down. And what she believed was she was waiting for the one child out of 10. There were 9 were there.
Oh, really?
And when the 10th got there, you know, she hung on for a little while longer. It was a pretty good party. They were all there.
Right.
And then she was able to go.
And your comment on that, about the image of traveling, how did you come by that insight? What brought that to mind as you shared that?
Well, it's very common. It's very common, and so it was almost like it was knocked over my head. I mean, you hear so many people fretting about traveling and needing to prepare for that.
But as you said, they are traveling.
I think they are traveling. It's very clear to me that it's as if there's a veil between life and death, and that when you're closer to death, that veil starts to lift or to become thinner and thinner. And when you're the person who's dying, it seems as if you're able to see a little bit farther down the road than what I may be or you may be.
In the second half of the show, I'd like to come back to your work, particularly as a spiritual director. And we have some more video that lifts that aspect of it up. But before we take a break, just give us a listing of some of the other services besides pain management that you originally spoke about.
We have social workers who will help people with their insurance or Medicare or Medicaid needs and paperwork, help people to determine, if they have their advance directives, living will and durable powers of attorney, things like that.
Those practical kinds
All those
of things.
practical things, and help people with communication issues or emotional issues within the family. We have a huge volunteer corps. We have over 200 volunteers who do a myriad of things for the family members and the patients.
And what about after death, the follow-up for the bereaved?
We follow the loved ones for up to 15 months after the person dies. And we have a whole core of grief support groups that are open to people within our service area, whether or not the death they experienced was due to someone involved in hospice care.
Okay, well, thank you for that summary. Thank you, folks, for being with us today. We'll be back in just a moment after a break. Welcome back to Austin Faith Dialogue, where today our subject is Hospice Austin. That's service in the community that is extended to those who are terminally ill and their families. We've been talking to Janet Makis, who is the Director of Spiritual Care for Hospice Austin. And Janet, as we continue our conversation, I think Janice Smith used to be the chaplain of Hospice, so I beg your pardon for bringing her name
It's
into
either easier or more confusing.
Yeah, right. We were in the first half talking about the, going in the spiritual direction here as far as what you are able to do, particularly as the Director of Spiritual Care, as you work with folks immediately or as you're working with others who are more hands-on. But what is the heart of your ministry?
Well, it's an interesting thing to try to describe the job of a chaplain, and especially of a chaplain who's associated with an agency that is not religious-based. Mm-hmm. The way we describe it in our department is that we believe that at the core, or at the essence of all people, is spirit. And spirit is what connects us to others. It's what connects us to God. It's what makes us seek a relationship with ourselves, with the rest of creation. Mm-hmm. It's what causes us to ask questions of meaning and purpose. And how we communally act out our spiritual lives is our religion. And so it's as if our spiritual self is something sort of amorphous and perhaps bigger than what is defined in the religion.
But as you apply this to those who are terminally ill, what does that mean?
That means that when we go to visit with people, we help them with their questions of meaning and purpose. We help them with their questions of direction. What does it mean to be me now that I'm no longer able to do the things that I've always done that
Mm-hmm.
have defined me?
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to be me when I don't look the same? Mm-hmm. What does it mean to be me when perhaps I've always been a person of faith, but now I feel faithless? Mm-hmm. It's sometimes being with people in the darkness of their souls.
Okay. Well, I think that gives us a lead into what we're going to see now on some more of this video from Family Experiences Productions that we'll take a look at and then come back to again.
This is a long process, and we as caregivers, we don't know when it's going to end.
If you can have a certain amount of time every day or a certain number of days a week where you can get out of the caregiving situation and take care of yourself for a certain period of time, that then allows you to be a more effective caregiver because you're not drained and stressed all of the time.
Just simply getting physically away from the situation from time to time can help in creating some relief from the intensity.
What I recommend that caregivers do is take the time that they have carved out for themselves and use that time to do things that are important to them. That's different for everyone. It may be exercise, or it could be painting, or some sort of outlet that's specific to the caregiver, and not for example, stopping taking care of your father and starting to take care of your children during that hour, but carving out time that is specific to the caregiver and meets a need of the caregiver.
Some of the things that happen when a person is sick, some of the things that people say and do when they're confused, we just have to face it. Sometimes it's funny.
Humor is one of the good things in life, and this is a time when you need all those things.
It's appropriate, it's helpful, and it rebuilds a foundation that sometimes feels like it's crumbling.
Yeah, I'm dying, but hell, so are you sometime. I'm just going to do it a little quicker. I can joke about it. I couldn't in the beginning, but I've got to a point of acceptance, and I can joke about it. So do the same with me. Don't feel that you've got to be overly careful. Don't feel that you're standing on a crate of eggs. You're not.
We are helping ourselves get through whatever we have to get through when we laugh. So we've got to laugh through all of this.
For the caregivers, it is sort of a double duty of trying to care for this person physically, trying to be there for them emotionally. And so it's a really critical time that they need someone to also care for them a little bit.
To be able to come and talk about their fears, talk about how angry they are, how upset, how unfair it is, whatever they're struggling with.
That's a huge burden lifter.
Because if they can have a place where they can deal with all of that stuff, then that's all those emotions won't be pulling them down so much.
Just having one other person that kind of knows what's going on and that cares is really important at that time. Feel like you're not out there alone.
People seldom listen to this, but the one piece of advice that I really want people to know is that they can only do what they can do, and that people need to go easy on themselves. You really never get to be a master at caring for someone who's dying, because say you care for your sister who's dying, and then you find yourself a caregiver again, but now it's your husband. And you never cared for a husband who died before, or even if you did, it was a different husband. And so it's always new, and it's always painful, and you always find yourself in a tender and new predicament. So you have to be gracious with yourself.
You're doing all you can do sometimes, and that's enough. And everything you can give is enough.
When I try to tell people, this is not all doom and gloom, I think that sometimes that's interpreted as, oh, well, this isn't going to feel as bad as it feels. It's going to hurt. Your heart will be broken.
Some people sort of take this as a wake-up call and will decide there are certain things that are important, and they're going to just focus on that and let people know how they feel about them or say things that have needed to be said.
It's interesting, as we watched that, Janet, I was aware of the theme that we were talking about at the beginning of the second half of spirituality. Mm-hmm. And suddenly I was applying it not to the person who's terminally ill, but to the caregiver, mm-hmm. the person or individual who is with that individual who's dying. And spirituality really enters in from that standpoint. It's taking care of yourself.
Right.
And of availing yourself of the resource of humor, which is in the situation. Mm-hmm. Could you expand on what we just saw here?
Well, I think it's the idea that in order to give, you have to have a well from which you can draw. Mm-hmm. And if you run the well dry, there's nothing left to give. And so it has to be replenished in some way. We also have to realize that no matter what, we can't be all things to some person, mm-hmm. that it's okay to step away from the bedside for an hour or two a day and let someone else be there. There are other people who can meet our loved ones' needs. Mm-hmm. And then to understand, humor doesn't always mean that it's a big belly laugh. It's sometimes it's a matter of just seeing the pleasure of life also.
I was thinking, as you mentioned, of not having to cope with this alone. Mm-hmm. And they talked about the therapy and the counseling that's mm-hmm. available to folks, and that's also available through hospice.
Yes. During the person's illness, the social workers and chaplains are certainly available for mm-hmm. the loved ones as well as the patient. And then after the patient's death, the bereavement program is available to the loved ones. Mm-hmm. And we have groups and we have some one-on-one counseling available for people.
How do you draw the line between counseling, mm-hmm. therapy in that regular sense, and spiritual care?
Well, I think that there's a lot of crossover. I think some of it is intention, and some of it is the idea of looking that this is something beyond just me. Maybe there's more depth to this. Where is God calling me in mm-hmm. this? Where do I see God acting in my life? in this. And then if you have a particular religious tradition, how does this fit in your tradition? I remember working with a woman one time during Advent, and we would talk each week about the different weeks of Advent. And one week it was hope, and one week it was love, and one week it was peace. And we were talking about what does it mean to find peace at this time in your life? What does it mean to know peace as you say goodbye to people? And that, you know, that worked very closely with her religious tradition, with spiritual growth, and then sort of therapeutic. There was a great deal of therapeutic aspects, many therapeutic aspects to this. So a lot of healing by using sort of religious overlay.
Yes, and I think that that's where persons out of faith traditions have resources to draw upon.
That's right.
That can give meaning.
That's
that
right.
might not be there otherwise.
And that's something that we do sometimes with people who don't have a religious background or a faith background, but they may have some sort of spiritual life or an understanding. Sometimes the chaplains will help create rituals or traditions at that time.
It's appropriate for that individual.
That's right.
I think we ought to, in the minute or two we have left, bring up the little view of your newsletter, Hospice Austin, which is available to folks if they want to learn more about what you're doing, about what your services are, and a phone number to go with it. I see it's there on the monitor, which you can repeat for us.
342-4700.
I always feel like I'm in the optometrist's office trying to see this at a distance, so thanks for doing that. Like to also say that if people want to take what we've said here today and go with it, and they call and they say, I want to talk to Janet Makis since I saw her on television.
Yes.
How would you feel about that?
I would feel fine with that. They can call me at 342-4700.
Okay, and I think that's one of the things that makes a difference, is if they're not just talking to a stranger, but somebody that they know at least a little bit about and know something of what you said here. And in concluding too, Janet, you've been with the program how long?
5 years at Hospice Austin.
And you're finding fulfillment in that.
I am. It's a very fulfilling job. I work with terrific people. It's mission focused, and Hospice Austin adheres very closely to the hospice philosophy.
Okay. Well, you've adhered very closely to our interest and our needs today. Thank you, Janet Makis. Thank you, folks, for being with us on this edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. Be with us again next week. I'm Richard Thompson on behalf of Austin Metropolitan Ministries, wishing you peace.